The first known death sentence in California was recorded in 1778. On April 6, 1778, 4 Kumeyaay chiefs from a Mission San Diego area Rancheria were convicted of conspiring to kill Christians and were sentenced to death by Jose Francisco Ortega, commandant of the Presidio of San Diego. The four were to be shot on April 11th. However, there is some doubt whether the executions actually took place. Four methods have been used historically for executions. Until slightly before California was admitted into the Union, executions were carried out by firing squad. Upon admission, the state adopted hanging as the method of choice. The Penal Code was modified on February 14, 1872. To state that hangings were to take place inside the confines of the county jail or other private places. The only people allowed to be present were the county sheriff, a physician, and the county district attorney, who would in addition select at least 12 reputable citizens. No more than 2 ministers of the gospel and no more than 5 people selected by the condemned could also be present. Executions were moved to the state level in 1889 when the law was updated so that hangings would occur in one of the state prisons, San Quentin State Prison and Folsom State Prison. According to the California Department of Corrections, although the law did not require the trial judge to choose a specific prison, it was customary for recidivists to be sent to Folsom. Under these new laws, the first execution at San Quentin was Jose Gabriel on March 3, 1893, for murder. The first hanging at Folsom was Chin Hain, also for murder, on December 13, 1895. A total of 215 inmates were hanged at San Quentin and a total of 93 were hanged at Folsom. Major Raymond Rattlesnake James, Lisenba, was born to Alabama sharecroppers on March 6, 1894. He also known as Robert S. James. He was the last man to be executed by hanging in California. Was living the life of a cotton picker when he learned he was the sole beneficiary of his uncle's $4,000 life insurance policy. Lisenba moved to Birmingham, changed his name to Robert James, and went to Barber College. At age 26, he married Maud Duncan, who quickly divorced him for sadistic cruelty. James moved to Kansas, opened a barber shop and married again. Things worked out until a stranger came at him with a shotgun for getting his young daughter pregnant. James skipped town, leaving his wife behind. He moved to Fargo in 1932, bought another barber shop, and married a Fargo woman, Winona Wallace. He immediately took out a life insurance policy on her, and 3 months later, they went to Pikes Peak for their honeymoon. In 1941, while driving down Pikes Peak, their automobile went off the road. James went for aid. When the persons called upon reached the automobile, they found James' wife lying partly outside the car with her head badly crushed and a bloody hammer in the back of the car. James appeared unhurt. Winona recovered after 2 weeks in the hospital, and the couple stayed in a tourist cabin near Colorado Springs. A short time later, James arrived at a police station to report that his poor wife had drowned in a bathtub. He explained that she must have still been dizzy from the mountain mishap and slipped unconscious beneath the water. James collected a $14,000 insurance settlement and headed back to Alabama to marry wife number 4. When she learned he wanted to take out life insurance on her, she said, "People you insure always die of something strange," and divorced him. His next victim was his accident-prone nephew, Cornelius Wright. James took out insurance on the young sailor, invited him to visit while on leave, and gave him the use of his car. Nash writes, Wright promptly drove off a cliff, killing himself. The mechanic who towed the wreck back to James told him that something was wrong with the steering wheel. James next opened a large barber shop in Los Angeles, where he insured and then married a tall, blonde, 26-year-old manicurist named Mary Bush. In 1935, James and a friend, Charlie Hope, procured 2 rattlesnakes, and for half the life insurance, Hope helped James kill Mary. Mary was pregnant and allegedly wanted an abortion, so James had Hope pose as a doctor who could help her out. Hope arrived at the house to find James had blindfolded Mary and tied her to the kitchen table. They reportedly gave her whiskey so she wouldn't feel anything and then stuck her foot into a box containing the snakes. They left her to die, but when James came home, Mary was still alive. Hope testified that James then drowned her in the bathtub, dragged her to a lily pond in the backyard, and left her face down in the water to be accidentally discovered the next day. Charles watched as Ray put Mary Emma's foot in the box with the 2 snakes and the serpents bit the woman. He then left the house, returned the snakes to Snake Joe, and picked up his wife. Returning to the house at 1:30 a.m., August 4th, Charles found Ray in quite a state. The snakes were no good, Ray told him. Mary Emma wasn't even sick. Ray had been drinking, and he decided that he was going to drown his wife. Ray emerged from house about 4 a.m., telling Charles, "That's that." Charles left, telling Ray that he still expected to pay the $100 for getting the snakes. That evening, Ray invited Viola and James Pemberton over to have dinner. They entered the house, but didn't see Mary Emma. Ray suggested looking for her in the garden. Grabbing flashlights, they headed out back. James Pemberton found Mary Emma face down in the fish pond. Her left leg looked black and swollen. Police were summoned and the grieving husband was advised that his poor wife had apparently been bitten by a rattlesnake and in her shock, she had fallen into the pond and drowned. A $5,000 insurance policy with double indemnity would help assuage his pain. Things would have gone unnoticed if Lisenba had not been suspected of sleeping with his niece, which under California law at the time was a felony offense. He was arrested and charged with incest on April 19, 1936. The police must have known they were dealing with a B apparently. The cops gave Ray a bit of the 3rd degree. After some preliminary questioning in the office of the district attorney, he was taken by the officers to a private home, adjoining that where the defendant had been living with his niece, and where admittedly he was held incommunicado for a period of about 48 hours, during all of which time he was admittedly subjected to incessant questioning by the officers who worked in shifts. The defendant was apparently deprived of rest and sleep during practically all of such period. Apparently, during this questioning, authorities uncovered and developed the criminal character of Mary Emma's death a few months before. However, Ray held out and it wasn't until May 3, 1936 that he confessed to the plot to kill his second wife. According to Ray, he and Charles had planned to kill Mary Emma for the insurance money, but when the snakes failed to work, Ray left the scene and told Charles to fix it by burning down the house. Unfortunately, Charles opted to drown the victim, which Ray said was the worst thing he could have done and that now they had to figure something else out. Fortunately, by this time the snakebite had taken hold and was beginning to discolor the corpse's foot. That's how the two of them figured out to put her in the fish pond, where her husband and the dinner guests found her. For their troubles, Lisenba received the death penalty, and Charles Hope was sentenced to life in prison. Police first believed Mary had gotten drunk and accidentally drowned. But a few months later, James, now going as Major Raymond Lisenba, was arrested on a different crime. A subsequent investigation finally landed him in San Quentin for Mary's murder. On May 9, 1942, he was the last man to die in the gallows in California. Unfortunately for Robert James, the hanging was poorly maneuvered. It took more than 10 minutes for him to die. He was 48 years old at the time of his execution. Thank you for watching Death Row.